Hey guys! Tonight we begin with a quiet stroll behind ornate gates, down moonlit corridors, into the hush of ancient Chinese palaces. Dim your lights, get comfy, maybe wrap yourself in a blanket. We're going to talk about emperors and empresses, concubines, and palace intrigue, but in a mellow way, so that your eyelids droop rather than your heart race. Let's float into the vastness of Imperial China. Not always the stuff of fairy tales, more often a world of suffocating protocol, hidden rivalries, and fragile bodies. The people at the top had it glamorous, sure, but also lonely, unhealthy, constrained, and sometimes ridiculously inbred. Because why not double down on maintaining pure bloodlines? We'll begin with the idea of the inner palace, Hogong, the palace within the palace. In the Chinese imperial system, the emperor's many women lived in a highly regulated hierarchy. The empress, Huanghu, reigned supreme there, the legal wife, the mother of all under heaven. Below her, consorts, concubines, attendants, ladies in waiting, each ranked, policed, timed, and constantly vying for attention. Wikipedia +1. Even in the Qin Dynasty, 1644 to 1912, the system was rigid. There were 8 official ranks, from the empress down to second-class attendants. The collector, the emperor's bedchamber, his daily life, his decisions, all had to comply with ritual. The women had to wait, perform, curry favor, survive gossip, all while producing heirs or losing status. It's a system designed to make life quiet, but not peaceful. Empress and concubine, a tale of 2 lives. Let's pause at Empress Fang, Ming Dynasty, because her life is quietly tragic and illustrative. Empress Fang, Empress Xiaoli, 1516 to 1547, was from the Fang clan, selected into the palace in 1531. She became a concubine and later empress to the Qin Emperor. Wikipedia. She was described as talented and beautiful, of course, but there was one problem. The emperor apparently refused intimacy with women over age 15. Yes, you heard that right. Once she passed some age threshold, he abstained. Fang, by then grown, suffered from that refusal. Her sorrow is recorded. Wikipedia. Imagine living in the great palace, bearing the title of empress, but cut off from the most basic act that would affirm your status. That disjunction, the public prestige and the private emptiness, is one of those cruel little ironies of palace life. The Dugu sisters, power, marriage, and dynasty. Let's float over to an earlier time. The Dugu sisters. The Dugu clan was partly Xianbei, partly Han. 3 sisters from this clan ended up as empresses, or posthumously honored as such, in successive dynastic shifts. Wikipedia 1, Dugu Qianluo was empress to Emperor Wen of Sui. Their marriage, reportedly lasting 45 years, is often held up as a kind of monogamous anomaly in a world of concubines. She was influential behind the throne. But monogamy here wasn't a break from palace strife. It was a rare form of stability in a system built on competition. The sisters' marriages into imperial families illustrate how marriages were weapons of statecraft. Alliances, legitimacies, consolidation, more than romantic unions. Because dynastic politics had to be preserved. Bloodlines, clan backing, succession legitimacy, all that demanded marital maneuvering, inbreeding, genetics, and ancient China. You might ask, was inbreeding a thing in China's imperial lines? The short answer, yes, in some cases, though the pattern differs from European royal inbreeding. Recent ancient genome studies suggest consanguinity, i.e., marriage among blood relations, in some prehistoric Chinese populations existed. Science direct. But that's pre-imperial societies, not the palace dynasties per se. In the imperial context, the pressure was less about sibling marriage and more about controlling which clans could intermarry into the court. The goal, to keep local powers checked, avoid too many alliances that could threaten the throne, and retain prestige. So many consorts came from elite clans that already had connections to the court. In that sense, blood ties were reinforced regionally. But even without extreme incest, the imperial court's marriage strategies concentrate many aristocratic lineages inside the elite loop. The risk: genetic bottlenecks, physical fragility, higher disease susceptibility, maybe subtle, maybe long-term, but real. Interestingly, one study of Chinese imperial families from 211 BC to 1912 found that empresses had a significantly more male-biased sex ratio, 0.61, in their offspring compared to concubines, 0.53. Springerlink, that suggests those at the very top may have had somewhat different biological conditions or selective pressures. It's tempting to read it as the powerful mothers produced more sons to inherit power, but it also hints at underlying physiological or social stress differences. Princess Changde, A Princess's Revenge. Let's drift to Princess Changde, Ming Dynasty, 1424 to 1470. She was a daughter of Emperor Xuanzong, full sister to Emperor Yingzong. Wikipedia. Her life is not one of tragic death or extreme scandal, but of that slow, grinding palace tension we love to unpack. She was married at age 12 to Sui Huan. Wikipedia. When she was older, she discovered her husband had taken a servant maid, i.e., begun an affair. Rather than sulk privately, she marched directly to her brother the emperor and lodged a formal complaint over this insult to her status. Wikipedia. The emperor had Shui Huan arrested and interrogated. Technically, he was sentenced to death, though in practice, he was imprisoned then released. Wikipedia. That moment, a princess invoking the power of her imperial brother to punish her husband, is telling. It shows how in the palace, status mattered. Her honor, her dignity, had weight. She was not passive, but even so, despite her royal backing, her marriage was troubled and her dignity stained. That's the kind of subtle tragedy I like. By the time she died in 1470, aged approximately 46, her court suspended business for a day in her honor. But her tomb was destroyed later. Fragments were recovered only centuries later. Wikipedia Princess AI. Power, conspiracy, suicide. Let's drift further back to the Han Dynasty. Princess Ai died 80 BCE, was a daughter of Emperor Wu and sister of Emperor Zhao. Wikipedia. Her mother is unknown. What we do know, when her brother Zhao became emperor as a child, she was given the title of Grand Princess. She controlled much of palace administration, the seals, finances, internal personnel, even guard assignments. Wikipedia. That is unusually heavy power for a princess. Many ministers deferred to her. Wikipedia. But with power come enemies. Princess Ai became involved in political factionalism. She conspired with the Shangguan clan and with a prince den of Yan against the powerful minister Huoguang. Wikipedia. Their plot failed. In 80 BCE, Princess Ai committed suicide, or was forced to, in the face of backlash. Wikipedia. There is a chill in the story. Someone who wielded vast influence, but still ended up isolated, outmaneuvered, destroyed. In the court, No amount of palace control can entirely immunize you. The quiet deaths, illnesses, and fragility of royal bodies. One of the things that often gets lost in sweeping dynastic narratives is how ill health, disease, and weak constitutions shaped palace life. Many emperors and consorts died young or were crippled by chronic conditions. The pressure to produce heirs, the close quarters, the lack of modern medicine, all conspired. We have Empress Fang's sadness over imposed abstinence. We have princesses filing petitions, suffering marital betrayals. But we also have thousands of unnamed concubines who fell from favor, were demoted, imprisoned, or died in obscurity. In the Ming Dynasty, some concubines were kidnapped, tortured, or forced to commit suicide. Ancient origins. You won't see that in inscriptions, but in palace records, it's there, quiet and dark. We also glimpse one of the more infamous stories. Consort Zhen of the late Qing, Guangxu Emperor's consort. She was reportedly drowned in a well during the Boxer Rebellion period, 1900, on the orders of Empress Dowager Cixi, after being left behind when the court fled Beijing. The Collector. That story is semi-legendary, but it speaks to the precariousness of favor and life in the palace. The palace is glamorous. The palace is gilded. But behind the screens, many died in silence. Part 1. The Ming Dynasty, the emperor who forgot how to rule. Hey guys, tonight we're going to drift backward into candlelight and porcelain silence, into the Ming Dynasty. Go ahead, dim the lights, let the air get a little heavy. The year is 1421. Beijing smells faintly of incense and coal smoke, and somewhere behind red lacquered gates sits the son of heaven, utterly miserable. The Ming were supposed to be the restoration, a fresh, shining restart after Mongol rule. But like most restarts, it got buggy fast. Our first sleepy companion tonight is the Zhengtong Emperor, born Zhu Qizhen. He came to the throne at the tender age of 8, because in Imperial China, why not give supreme power to a third grader? He grew up surrounded by eunuchs, not the fun kind of entourage. These were officials who had been surgically simplified to guarantee loyalty. In practice, they were ruthless bureaucratic sharks. One in particular, Wang Zhen, basically raised the boy. Wang Zhen told him when to eat, what to sign, and how to exist. Imagine having your childhood run by your HR department. When Zhengtong was 22, Wang Zhen convinced him that leading an army personally against the Mongols would make him look heroic, because that always works out. So in 1449, the young emperor marched out of Beijing with 500,000 men, half of them probably regretting it by day 2. What followed was the Tumu Crisis, a battle so disastrous it feels like satire. Wang Zhen ignored his generals, the army ran out of water, and the emperor himself was captured. Yes, the literal son of heaven, kidnapped. You can almost hear the collective facepalm of the capital. The Ming court panicked. Ministers debated whether they should ransom him, attack, or just pretend it didn't happen. Eventually, they put his brother on the throne. Problem solved. Sort of. Zhengtong, meanwhile, spent years in Mongol captivity, where he learned humility and probably some excellent goat recipes. When he was finally released, his brother, now the Jingtai Emperor, didn't exactly roll out a red carpet. So our poor ex-emperor lived quietly under house arrest, technically alive, politically erased. Then one day, because dynastic politics are messy, the Jingtai Emperor fell ill. Zhengtong staged a soft little coup. walked back onto the throne and renamed himself the Qin Emperor, obedient to heaven, which is adorable because he literally just disobeyed it. He ruled for 7 uneasy years, mostly paranoid, increasingly isolated, occasionally executing people who reminded him of old humiliations. When he died in 1464, no one cried loudly enough to get noticed. The Ming court, by now, was addicted to ceremonial order. Every breath of the emperor was regulated. The women of the harem lived behind screens, ranked by virtue, catalogued by fertility reports. The bureaucracy was efficient in the way a haunted clock is efficient, always ticking, never alive. Let's float a bit forward to the Jiajing Emperor, born 1507. He's one of those rulers historians call complicated, which is polite for completely exhausting. He spent most of his life chasing immortality through alchemy, drinking elixirs made of mercury, gold, and whatever unlucky ingredients his Taoist priests suggested that week. He believed the universe would reward his piety with eternal youth. Spoiler, it didn't. He also refused to perform normal imperial duties, like showing up. He moved into a private Taoist retreat inside the Forbidden City and let his eunuchs run the empire. Over time, he started insisting that virgin girls be brought to him to help purify his qi, his life energy. Dozens of palace maids were forced into service. Some later plotted to strangle him in his sleep. They failed, obviously, but honestly, fair attempt. Jiajing survived that incident and doubled down on fasting, prayer, and paranoia. He rarely saw his ministers, hardly ate, and eventually died, surrounded by jars of useless elixirs. The official record claims he ascended to the immortals. Translation: the mercury finally did its job. The Ming court didn't stop its descent into weirdness there. The late dynasty emperors were basically shut-ins. The Wanli emperor, who reigned for 48 years, spent the last 2 decades refusing to attend meetings. He communicated exclusively through sealed notes, like the world's first passive-aggressive emailer. The empire stagnated while he argued about which of his sons deserved succession. Outside, famine spread. Inside, the kitchen still served 10 courses at breakfast. What makes the Ming so hypnotic at night isn't the drama. It's the slow decay. Picture the Forbidden City by candlelight. Yellow tiles under moon haze. Courtiers shuffling like ghosts. Silk rustling. Ink drying on yet another unread memorial. Power here isn't loud. It's heavy. Everyone bows too long, speaks too carefully, breathes too softly. The emperors drown not in rebellion, but in etiquette. By the time the Manchus were peeking over the northern wall, the Ming court was spiritually bankrupt. The Qin Emperor, the last of the line, tried to clean up corruption, but it was far too late. In 1644, rebels reached Beijing. He fled to a hill behind the palace and hanged himself with his sash. His last words, according to legend, were an apology, not to the people, but to his ancestors. Because even in death, Ming emperors worried more about family expectations than national collapse. Part 2. The Tang Dynasty, the woman who became the dragon. Hey guys, welcome back. If you're already half asleep, that's fine. Just keep listening. Tonight's story is about one of the most quietly dangerous people to ever sit on a throne. A woman who took the entire Chinese imperial system, turned it inside out, and did it all with perfect posture. Her name was Wu Zetian, and she ruled in the Tang Dynasty, China's golden age of poetry, art, and backstabbing. Let's float back to the 7th century. The capital is Chang'an, the largest city in the world at the time, a maze of lanterns, perfumes, and paperwork. Think of it as the ancient version of a mega-corporate office park, but everyone's wearing embroidered silk and quoting Confucius. Wu Zetian was born around 624 CE. Her family was wealthy, educated, and, inconveniently for patriarchy, ambitious. By age 14, Hey guys, welcome back. Go ahead, dim the lights, fluff up that pillow, and take a deep breath. Tonight, we drift a little deeper into another era, one painted in crimson and gold, but held together with secrets and paranoia. This is Imperial China, but not the glossy version in tourist brochures. This is the Ming Dynasty, a grand empire where walls got taller, courtiers bowed lower, and emperors quietly lost their grip on reality. The Ming era started in the 14th century, right after the Mongols were kicked out. A good start, you'd think. The founder, Zhu Yuanzhang, or as he styled himself, the Hongwu Emperor, came from nothing. Literally nothing. He was a poor peasant, orphaned, and even joined a Buddhist monastery before becoming a rebel soldier. And somehow, through a mix of sheer survival instinct and a suspiciously convenient amount of luck, he became emperor. Now, you might expect him to be compassionate, having known poverty and hunger. But no. Hongwu ruled like a man who still thought everyone was out to steal his food, which, to be fair, wasn't entirely wrong, but the paranoia didn't really make for a chill workplace. Under Hongwu, the Ming bureaucracy became a daily anxiety attack. He executed thousands of officials for things like looking disloyal or writing suspiciously poetic letters. One minister got beheaded because his handwriting was too elegant, which Hongwu thought was evidence of vanity. And when you're the emperor, apparently that's a solid reason. She dropped the pretense entirely and declared herself emperor of a new dynasty, the Zhou. China, for the first and only time, was ruled openly by a woman. Officially, she was sacred and divine emperor. Unofficially, she was everyone's HR nightmare. Imagine the scene. Middle-aged ministers kneeling before a woman they used to patronize, forced to call her Your Majesty. That must have burned. Some whispered that comets appeared as warnings. Others praised her as a bodhisattva, a living Buddhist saint. Wu Zetian nodded, lit more incense, and kept governing. She wasn't just ruthless. She was competent. Under her, the economy stabilized, famine relief improved, and borders held. But at night, the palace corridors were silent, except for the shuffling of scribes and the occasional scream from the prison cells. Because maintaining divine order apparently required a lot of paperwork and executions. One chronicler wrote that she ruled through fear and grace in equal measure, which sounds poetic until you realize it's historian code for people disappeared. She had a bureau literally named the Secret Investigations Office, the Tang equivalent of an anonymous feedback form, except it ended with your family being exiled to the desert. And yet, scholars flourished. She sponsored printing, poetry, education. It's hard to categorize her. Part tyrant, part reformer, part myth. At 60-something, she was still running the empire, still terrifying everyone, still wearing gold dragon robes tailored for a man's body. Because why not double down on symbolism? Her final years, though, were quiet in a melancholy way. She grew ill, suspicious, surrounded by young courtiers who flattered her to death. Literally, almost. By 705, ministers staged a gentle coup. Gentle meaning They barged in and told her to retire. She did, without a fight. At 81, she simply stopped. After decades of control, she released the reins like someone finally exhaling. They buried her beside Emperor Gaozong under a twin tomb mound, equal in size. Her stele, the big stone inscription every ruler gets, was left blank. No text, no titles, just an empty tablet in the wind. It's the most poetic ending possible. History's only female emperor, defined by silence. When you think about it, it fits her perfectly. She wrote her story in power, not words. And when it ended, she left space for the rest of us to guess. So, if your eyelids are heavy now, imagine that tomb under moonlight. The wind tracing dust across an uncarved stone. The faint hum of crickets where once edicts ruled empires. That's the sound of the Tang Dynasty's most dangerous dreamer finally sleeping.